You should read Brunig's old post on identitarian deference. I don't think I've ever read this. Identitarian deference. Oh, wait, hold on. This could actually be really good. Wait, hold on. Freddie's going after the identitarians again. At the root of his complaint here is the slipperiness of identitarian defense. Roughly, identitarian defense is the idea that privileged individuals should defer to the opinions and views of oppressed individuals, especially on topics relevant to those individuals' oppression. It sounds straightforward, but can become exceedingly complicated in practice. Here are some of these issues. The necessity of an antecedent oppression theory. To defer to the views of oppressed people, you must first know who the oppressed people are. The method of identitarian deference, or ID, cannot provide any guidance to this question. On its face, ID would demand you look to oppressed people to tell you who oppressed people are, but to do this, you would first have to know who the oppressed people are to know who to look to. To escape this impossible circularity, one is forced to have an antecedent oppression theory. That is, you must have your own independent theory of who is oppressed in order to even practice ID. But where do you get this antecedent theory? You'd have to somehow arrive at it on your own through reflection, treatises on justice, morality, and so on. Wherever you get it, you necessarily get it in some way that does not involve ID. As such, the only way to get ID off the ground is to have some other understanding of oppression that is totally separate from it. That then raises the question of what ID adds to the picture. To practice ID, you must already have a detailed theory of what makes someone oppressed. But if you already have a detailed theory of what makes someone oppressed, what do you need ID for? Choosing between oppressed voices. Once you are able to identify which people are the oppressed ones, you then have to figure out which oppressed voices to defer to. Individuals in a particular oppressed group are not a monolith, and therefore necessarily disagree with one another. Take affirmative action, for example. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is vehemently opposed to the idea of affirmative action, while Al Sharpton is not. To which voice should one defer? There are a variety of ways to handle disagreement, but none are terribly satisfactory. You can require that ID only attach to the majority view, but there are problems with such an approach. First, it may not always be knowable what the majority view is. In fact, if the issue has more than two perspectives, it's very possible there is no majority view, in which case you do what? Go with the plurality view? Second, it seems odd to think that the majority view will tell you what is correct. When the majority view enjoys 90% support, then maybe. But what if it's a 51 to 49% thing? Take abortion, for instance. A recent Gallup poll, this probably isn't recent anymore, found that among women, 44% identify as pro-life, while 50% identify as pro-choice. Are we really prepared to say that ID indicates you should be pro-choice? Is that 6% difference among women's perspectives enough to animate that move? What if 4% of women change their minds? Would the dictates of ID flip, demanding the allies of women be pro-life? Furthermore, this is a national number. I can't find regional data, but I'd be very surprised if there were not at least some conservative-leaning states where pro-life women outnumber pro-choice women. Should residents of those states defer to the majority voice of women in those states and believe as pro-lifers believe? Ooh, a good follow-up to this would be, what about the national view? Because if you were to go like worldwide, like what do all women believe? I bet you would start finding some like really bad, like, oh, okay, sure. Western women may support feminism on average by like a 60 to 40 split. But if you go internationally, what's like, well, Western feminist values suddenly aren't very important, huh? Third, the majority voice vacillates over time. For instance, since 1994, Pew has been asking black Americans what they think is most responsible for blacks not getting ahead. Blacks themselves or discrimination? This is the breakdown over time. Wow. I guess it's like 50-50, oscillating between discrimination and black people being the main one, with actually black people being the main one being the more common recent view. Sheesh. As you can see, in 1995, 60% of blacks thought discrimination was most responsible for blacks not getting ahead. That number is now down to 40%. And the majority of blacks now say blacks themselves are mostly responsible for not getting ahead. In the meantime, this answer shot up and down, with blacks some years citing discrimination as the biggest factor, and other years citing blacks themselves as the biggest factor. What should ID have demanded of us during those swings? Ooh. Is it really the case that in the late 1990s, we should have reformed our opinion and thought blacks themselves were mostly responsible for not getting ahead, and then switched that opinion again just a couple years later, and then switched that opinion again in yet a few more years? Another way to settle disagreements is to use facts and research. Ooh, that sounds nice. So, for instance, we could do studies and collect evidence about how much discrimination is harming blacks in the US. This sounds fine to me, but it also makes ID unnecessary. You can just look straight to the research. Finally, you can solve disputes by just cherry-picking voices you like. This, I suspect, is what most people actually do. True. For instance, you won't find any liberal deferring to a voice saying what the graph above says the majority of blacks believe. So what you can do is just figure out what you want to believe, and then find someone within the appropriate oppressed group who believes as you do. Then say you are deferring to their voice on this matter. This works as a way of resolving disputes, but only by gutting the whole point of ID. Finally, resolving disputes among oppressed people. The final problem I will raise here is how to handle disagreements among two different sets of oppressed people that are not reconcilable. The Israel-Palestine conflict, wow, way to go to the throat of this one, provides a helpful example. Jewish people and Palestinian people are both oppressed people, so both voices ought to be deferred to. There are some Jewish Israelis, how many I don't know, that have claimed that owing to their oppressed status, they should have total control over the disputed territories and have a Jewish-controlled state on this land. On the flip side, there are Palestinians who say their oppression can only be remedied by handing that same disputed land to Palestinians for their state. So what do? ID would presumably have us defer simultaneously to the voices of both people, but we literally cannot. So we would be forced to pick between the voices. This will require that we, once again, have some other external notion of what is right and wrong. Otherwise, we'd have no idea whose voice was the right one to listen to. If we have some external notion of what is right and wrong, it is once again very unclear what ID is bringing to the party. God damn! Matt Brunig, February 26, 2013. What an excellent article, essay, I guess. This is very well written. Not only do I agree with it, obviously, but this is one of the most succinct, this is actually one of the best pieces of political writing I've seen in a while, purely for its succinctness. They nailed the points right there. I love that. Is really good. Really, really good. Nice job, Matt. Nice job. I wish I could write like this. Lincoln in chat. Yeah, here. Yeah, 10 years old. Almost exactly 10 years old. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary in 15 days. Write more. I can write okay. But it would take me a lot of practice to be able to write that succinctly. Unfortunately, my biggest problem has always been brevity, as the people who like to make fun of me for this know, and I don't blame you. I love to ameliorate the reconciliation of my da-da-da-da-da. You get the joke, you get the meme. I'm not very good with that. It's always remember that when it comes to communication, the best communicator is the most effective communicator, especially when it comes to technical writing, like something political, anything that isn't like art or poetry oriented, first and foremost. I mean, there's art to everything written, but you know what I mean. The best writing is the writing that gets the most across to the most people. And if you're using words like ameliorate as a fill-in, like I do, that's bad communication. It's not impressive just because it's a fancy word, you know? Yeah, I am admittedly beset by verbosity. Exactly. It's not more or better or more impressive because it's a, multisyllabic. It doesn't. I am beset by pedantry and verbosity. Oh, forsooth. He made one on pronouns too. Well, hold on now. Hold your horses. I want it known, by the way, that my formal position on gender and gender pronouns and gender identity broadly is that they are incoherent, obsolete social constructs that I will defend only because when people attack them, they are not attacking them for being incoherent. They're attacking people for adopting incoherence that is outside of the normal incoherence. The existing standards are incoherent. Gender activists with their they, thems, and their xenopronouns and xenogenders are incoherent. They're all equally incoherent. There's not an underlying standard of coherence. It's all kind of dumb and useless, in my opinion. The only reason I defend one group against the other is because the attacks against the they, thems, and the zhers or whatever is because they're motivated by bigotry, not some kind of, I don't know, etymological or linguistic willingness to deconstruct the social constructs.